This week we are going to be reading some of the bookish online community's hot takes, and I could not be more excited. I had this idea as I was watching some 2023 end of the year content and hearing things that people were saying were super underhyped, or hearing people talk about things that I had never heard before that were like their best book of the year, or people putting things in their top 10 that I had only heard negative reviews of. That's where this video concept came from. That's what we're doing. Let's chat about what we're reading. First up is Book of Night by Holly Black. This is Holly Black's adult debut. When this came out, everyone was really heavily anticipating it. I think it let a lot of people down, but Sarah from Sarah Without an H has been saying nothing but good things about this. Book of Night is set in this fantasy world in which the magic system revolves around shadows and the things that the shadows can do. We are also going to be reading Open Throat, which I found from The Novel Neighbor, which is a TikTok account that I love, and this is what they had to say about this book.
Open Throat is the weirdest little book I read all year. I loved it. This is the story of a lonely queer mountain lion who lives at the base of the Hollywood sign and just comments on life in LA. But also it gets into gender and classism and climate change. A great time.
I absolutely love finding books that I know nothing about, and this sounds incredibly weird, so we're gonna check it out together. And finally, on Kayla from Books and Lala's recommendation, we're gonna be reading A Little Devil in America. Kayla's #1 book of the year being something that I have never seen anyone else talk about was just something that we had to fix. I definitely needed to read this book and see for myself because I feel like Kayla and I's reading tastes really aligns. I do love reading nonfiction, and when Kayla mentioned that the author of this book is a poet, I was absolutely sold. I didn't need to know anything else, but let's read the synopsis together. I was a devil in other countries, and I was a little devil in America too. Inspired by these few words spoken by Josephine Baker at the 1963 March on Washington, Hanif Abdurraqib has written a powerful reflection on how Black performance is inextricably woven into the fabric of American culture. Abdurraqib writes prose brimming with jubilation and pain, infused with the lyricism and rhythm of the musicians he loves. He explains the poignancy of performances big and small, each one feeling intensely familiar and vital, both timeless and desperately urgent. A Little Devil in America exalts the Black performance that unfolds in specific moments in time and space, from mid-century Paris to the moon and back down again to a cramped living room in Columbus, Ohio. I cannot wait for the journey that this book is about to bring us on. So without further ado, let's check out our first book. I'm about halfway through the Book of Night, and I feel like this is the book out of this entire video that most accurately is a hot take. So this is from Sarah Without an H, and she goes hard for this book. She hyped this book up so much that I wanted to read it, even though I feel like the general consensus is that nobody likes this book. She even said in her best books of 2023 that she has so many special editions of this that she bought for like 20 bucks, which is less expensive than you would get like a new release hardcover for sometimes. The public does not love this book. I'm halfway through and I have mixed feelings. The magic system in this book is so interesting, and I am so intrigued to find out more about this world. The magic system in here is all about shadows. So there are some people whose shadows quicken and they like become more solid, and then they can like send their shadow around to do other things. There are different specialties within this group of people as well. So some people can like get their shadows altered. There's drug implications of this. It's just such an interesting world that Holly Black has created, and I am greatly enjoying the world that we are in, the plot line that we are following. Our main character is just kind of insufferable, and she's making annoying decisions and other people are saying annoying things, and that's the bit that I'm not enjoying. I think that like this world, the plot, so interesting. I'm so intrigued. I want to know all of the secrets that everyone is keeping. I want to know. Her whole thing is that she's kind of like a con woman, and that's how she was like trained by this guy who's like not so great, who was involved with her mother somehow when she was a child. And so now she's basically like this con woman, and she has gotten into a sticky situation with some occult book. I am just not enjoying the dialogue. I'm not enjoying some of the decisions that she's making, but I also think she's a very real character. Like, she's very human, she's very accurate. I just want to shake her by the shoulders and be like, hey, maybe don't do that. Her sister's annoying, the boyfriend's kind of annoying, these men that she's dealing with who are also criminals are annoying. But you know what? Most humans are just annoying, so I'm not too mad about it. I'm excited to see where it goes. It's slowed down a bit at this point. I feel like the world building was done really well. We were flashing back to like her childhood a lot, so that was helping to kind of keep the pace up. And I feel like now we're at kind of a turning point where I'm hoping that something is going to happen, because right now it's getting a wee bit boring. So I'm hoping that we pick back up soon. I think honestly I'm just gonna check back in when I finish it, so I will see y'all then. I finished reading Book of Night and I have feelings. I think I'm gonna land at like a 3.5 on this one. The first 50%, I was super interested in the world building and nothing else. I think I told you guys I did not really enjoy our main character. I thought it dragged a lot in the middle. And then we got to the second half and it really was like an over-the-top thriller and I was having a good time. I was surprised there were twists and turns. I liked the little like heisty elements of this. I was having a good time. It felt like an over-the-top thriller that was just stuck into a fantasy book. And here's the situation. I never read The Cruel Prince. I am not a Holly Black girly, so I have not read any of her other work. I've not read any of her YA work, so I can't really put this in context of her other work, but I would read from this author in the future if she does write more adult books. So ultimately, I am very glad that Sarah kind of went out on a limb for this book, because I probably wouldn't have picked up a Holly Black book if it had not been for this, but I don't think that this one was a huge win for me. I think it could have been edited quite a bit in the middle there. I don't know. I think this is slated to be a duology. I don't know if that's still happening. I don't know if I would pick it up. I am really interested in this world, and I did really like the story that this turned into, but I thought the process to get there was a little bit tedious for my taste. So that's what I thought of Book of Night. Let's go read the next one. I have finished reading Open Throat, and I was gonna check in with you when I was in the middle of reading it, but this book was so weird that I could not take longer to read it. I basically read this in one sitting. It is so strange. It is a mountain lion who is living at the base of the Hollywood sign and just like commenting on the people that it sees. And then something happens and it leaves the Hollywood sign and things kind of go off the rails a little bit. It was so incredibly strange and I can't tell you if I loved it or hated it. So I think I'm gonna give it a 3-star. It's one of those books where I so see what the author is trying to do and I appreciate it, but I think maybe I just don't have a big enough brain to fully get it. And I think if I lived in LA, if you're a person who lives in LA, I think you're really gonna get a kick out of this. But I think there are some things that like went over my head a little bit. It's just such a complex book in not a lot of pages. Let me read you some quotes so that you get the sense. The epigraph, stunning. There is no creature whose inward being is so strong that it is not greatly determined by what lies outside it. George Eliot, Middlemarch. That quote made me want to read Middlemarch. Absolutely big brain way to start a book. This mountain lion is saying things like, don't hear the woman's voice. I start to wonder what she sounds like. I wonder what I sound like. It's this really meta look at what it is to be human, which is usually like my favorite thing in content, but I think this was just like a little bit much for me. I do love a talking animal, but this one, I feel like sometimes when we try to make a fantasy world or we try to make a talking animal or we put something in a world that is similar to ours but not ours, it becomes this weird mental game of trying to figure out what the words that are misspelled or mispronounced mean in actual our life and what the significance of that is, because this mountain lion obviously is not a human and has not grown up around humans. Seeing like LA spelled ELLAY, LA, and then there's these girls talking about scarcity and the mountain lion calls it Scare City. And it's things like that. It's a really hard thing to do well. And I think this book did a pretty good job of kind of walking that line between gimmicky and impactful. I think personally, I would have liked a little bit less of that and had just a couple of things that were that way for a reason. Like it was very clear that Scare City, that's a choice that the author made. That's something that they wanted to say. And some of the other things that were kind of chucked in there felt like it was like, you get the bit, right? You get, this is what I'm doing. That felt less impactful for me. There is this moment where it does get kind of witchy. So I think if you're a person who is kind of steeped in the like LA witch core vibe and are familiar with Hecate, I'm so sorry, I am not a witch girly, I don't know how to pronounce that. You're gonna get a kick out of this book and you should read it. I have one more quote to share with you because it was incredible. If you feel alone in the world, find someone to worship you. And this is the bit where it gets a little bit witchy. And yeah, it was very interesting. Commentary on LA, commentary on humans, commentary on queerness. I find it so interesting, especially now that I had never heard of this, because we are kind of in a weird book era and the girlies love weird books. This is never going to be a book that has mass appeal, and I, for one, don't think I would recommend anyone buy it full price without at least going into the bookstore and reading the first page of it. I checked it out from my library on my Kindle, and that was, I think, the best way for me to read this. I don't feel like it's something that I'm gonna want to go back to. It's not something that I want to have on my shelf. It's not something that I need to reread, but I am glad that I spent the hour of my time that I did spend reading it. I actually really want like a college class to read this, assign it as reading, and talk about it, because I think you could have such an interesting half an hour long conversation about this book with other people. Like, I want some liberal arts college in California to read this book in their seminar, and I want people to talk about it. This is exactly the type of thing that I feel like would have been so interesting to talk about in, like, I think I had like a feminism class, super interesting course, and that's exactly the type of thing that I would have wanted to read in that class, and kind of like exploring all of the little nuances and pieces of it that maybe would go over your head if you're reading it alone. So maybe a fantastic book club recommendation if you are a girly in LA and you want to make your friends read something super strange. That's my thoughts on Open Throat. On to the next book. I am 3 essays into A Little Devil in America, and this is gonna be 5 stars. I can tell already. I read the first essay of this as I was sitting in a coffee shop with my friend, and the first essay it's just this. No paragraphs, just that's it. I had to stop reading and just sit in the fact that this is going to be absolutely incredible. And then I read the second essay, which is called On Marathons and Tunnels, and that was 5 stars. One of the most incredible essays I have ever read. It's talking all about dance marathons and performance, and I'm gonna read you some quotes because I just need you to understand how good this writing is, and there's no way I'm gonna be able to explain that without just reading you some things. So this quote comes right after a passage talking about the person who set like the world record that kind of kicked off this dance marathon craze. And so her name is Alma Cummings, and she danced with 6 men in the Upper Manhattan's Audubon Ballroom for 27 hours straight. And this is what kind of like set off this dance marathon craze. And so they're talking about this image of her, the photo of her taken right after she stopped. In one hand, Cummings holds the shoes she danced in. A hole is blown clean through each of them, near where a foot might strike the ground during a spirited movement. Both holes wide as 2 open mouths, in awe, in horror. The combination of the really poetic language in a nonfiction book where I am learning so many things is just exceptional. I love it when poets write nonfiction. I'm getting similar vibes reading this as I did reading Know My Name by Chanel Miller. Chanel Miller is just such an incredible writer, and the emotion that's present in this book and the way that she tells her story I find to be very similar to the writing style that's present in here. The third essay I read was On Going Home as Performance, and it's all about funerals, and I'd like to read you a short quote from this essay as well. Once I had a conversation with a poet who also lost their mother. As we charted out our shared grief, the poet told me something they had learned from another poet. Well, we have 2 mothers, they began to tell me. The one we keep with us in our hearts, and the corpse we can't put down. There is the putting down of the metaphorical corpse, and then there is the carrying of the physical, but the hesitation to part with both comes from a similar place. A mother who has lost a child carries with her not only the corpse of that child, but the potential for what that life could have been. I mourn both the actual body and the potential for the whole person it held. How much better my time in the world could have been spent with all of the once living people I've loved still here. The drawn-out funeral, or the pictures on the wall, or the resemblances yelled into a night sky are all a part of that carrying. It is all fighting for the same message, holding on to the memory of someone with 2 hands and saying, I refuse to let you sink. I'm absolutely loving my time here. I'm gonna go read a couple more essays and then we'll check back in. Hello, I am here painting my boyfriend's birthday present, and I am about halfway through A Little Devil in America now, and I think it's time for us to check in. I'm still absolutely loving it. I did end up picking up the audiobook, and I will say I think I prefer reading this physically. I actually pushed this video out a week or 2 from when I was originally supposed to go up because I wanted to spend more time reading this. I have really been enjoying slowing down and taking my time with the first half of this. Unfortunately, this video does need to be done tomorrow, so I had picked up the audiobook. The audiobook is good. It's just, if you don't have an opinion over whether you would read something physically or audio, audio, I would choose to read this physically. And I love audiobooks, but this is something that I really feel like I want to like slow down and take my time with and underline. And it's a little bit more difficult to do that when I'm listening to it on audio. It's not narrated by the author, but I am painting. I am painting a little picture of my boyfriend and I don't have a head yet. So we gotta get going on that. We have already covered so many topics. We talked about Aretha Franklin. There was this really interesting essay that was about magic, and the structure of it came from this movie called The Prestige, which I love. It's one of my favorite movies, and I just had such a personal connection to that, and it was so interesting to kind of view this essay through that structure. I thought it was incredibly well done. We are now talking about Whitney Houston. We've talked about a lot of different performers. I just absolutely love how these essays are structured. It's one thing to read a nonfiction book and gain information. It's a completely different experience to read a nonfiction book and experience it as art. And I feel like that is exactly what this is. I'm going to finish painting and then I will let you guys know what I thought of the second half of this. I finished my painting and I finished my book. I already wrapped it. I forgot to show you guys, but I did take a picture. Here it is. Cute. This was incredible. 5 stars, new favorite. This is such a good book. And I'm so grateful that this video made me read it, but I am less grateful that this video made me read it quickly. I would have preferred to read like one of these a day and have this just sitting on my bedside table and just take a little nugget of knowledge every day out of this book. So I think I would like to revisit this again in the future. I'll probably reread it before this year is over. I want to share with you some of my favorites. On Marathons and Tunnels was fantastic. The Josephine Baker Monument can never be large enough. It is safe to say I've lost many games of spades. Those were 3 of my absolute favorites, but so many of these were just incredible. I absolutely love Hanifa Daraqib's writing style, just the way that these sentences are constructed and the way that these essays are constructed is just my exact favorite way to see something structured. I don't really know how to make that make more sense. This is something that I'm gonna think about for a really long time. There are just so many things in here. I feel like this is something that you could reread over and over again and just continue gleaning new knowledge from. Yeah, 5 star. This video was a huge success. I feel like we had 2, 3, 3.5 stars. And I feel like that's what's gonna happen when you read something that you've never heard of or you read something that's a bit of a hot take. I think ultimately we've answered the question. We can trust booktubers. And I think one of the reasons why I wanted to do this video in particular, I didn't want to read the books that I was already hearing everyone talk about because those are the things that I'm going to keep hearing everyone talk about. And those are the things that I'm gonna pick up on my own because it's in my circle. I'm gonna keep hearing about those. And so when I see them at bookshop, I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, I've heard a million people talk about this. I should pick that up. It's gonna be more likely to come up in videos and other content. But these books are things that I might not see that many people reading, and so I wanted to dedicate a whole video to picking a couple of the ones that were really intriguing to me and trying them out because I feel like that's something that I want to change about my reading is not just reading the most popular things, but reading the things that really call to me that I really want to read and also allowing myself to be influenced by just one person. So if you want to influence me to read any books, let me know your hot takes in the comments. Let me know the things that you've been loving that you think are maybe a little underhyped, that you haven't seen a lot of people scream about, that you want me to read. Thank you guys so much for being here. Truthfully, reading the comment section is the best part of my day, every day. I love you guys so much. I'm so glad you're here. And I will see you next week for another video. I post every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern. So I will see you then. Bye.